Hi, Professor. I don't know if you got my email, but I was having some issues uploading my video to the Canvas. I recorded it in Canvas, and then I tried to upload it, and it deleted the file. I tried recording it here and uploading it that way, and it wouldn't do it that way either. It said there was an error and wiped it, so I'm trying this new way. I'm gonna be uploading this to YouTube, and since I'm limited on time, there's not gonna be a lot of editing, so I promise the original was of much better quality, so gonna go ahead and get started. Every Hollywood movie has the difficult task of balancing accuracy and entertainment when creating a biography picture. So, in the 1995 biography film about the 33rd US President, Harry Truman, there are bound to be some artistic liberties made with the entertainment value in mind. Here are a few moments from the film and traits of Truman up for debate on their historical accuracy. First, let's start with something that they got right. The level of communication between Truman and Roosevelt and his participation as vice president. In the film, he is very out of the loop as vice president and has no real contribution during the roughly 3 months time period. And overall, he had very little communication with Roosevelt himself. Even before he officially becomes vice president, he does not have the chance to tell Roosevelt directly that he was not interested in the position. This was conducted over the phone. Truman is put on speaker so he can tell Roosevelt directly that he does not want to run alongside him as vice president. Roosevelt does not know that he is even on the line and continues to bash in a private manner on how Truman is damaging the Democratic Party with his choice not to run alongside him. Later, after Roosevelt is actually elected and Truman becomes vice president, Roosevelt invites Truman to a lunch at the White House. Truman arrives and seems very eager, and as shown in the movie, to have a discussion with Roosevelt regarding politics. But instead of talking politics, Roosevelt asks him how his wife is adjusting to life in Washington. This incongruity between the two men of talking on politics is demonstrated in the Robert Dallek biography. On page 19, it says that except for a lunch meeting at the White House in August, Truman had no direct contact with the president during the campaign. And it elaborates on that time frame on page 20, saying that Roosevelt saw Truman alone only twice during the 84 days he served as vice president. Another moment that they got right was Truman's discovery of Roosevelt's death. In the film, Truman is told that he is needed at the White House, which leads to a tense scene where he runs into a room full of grieving people, including the president's widow, Eleanor Roosevelt. This leads to a somber and foreboding tone as he is sworn in as the new president of the United States, a position that he did not even ask for. And in Truman's own words, when he writes to General Hap Arnold about Roosevelt's death in 1945, I don't think I ever suffered a greater blow than when I was told that Mr. Roosevelt had died. Additionally, the scene where he asks Eleanor Roosevelt, "Is there anything I can do for you?" and she replies, "Is there anything we can do for you? You're the one who's in trouble now," is directly quoted in the Robert Dallek biography, which has shocking accuracy of the movie. Another positive, they accurately displayed that Truman saw himself as an accidental president and didn't even really enjoy being president. Even from the start, in a scene mentioned before, he tries to tell Roosevelt that he is not interested in becoming the vice president and does not want to run alongside him in the election, but he does not have the chance to speak directly to him over the phone. Later, once he becomes vice president, Best tells Truman that he should run for election after his fill-in time for Roosevelt is up, so that way he doesn't feel like his accomplishments and appointment to the position was a mistake. She says this in response to his plans on not running for president so they can return home and live their lives comfortably. This all reflects that Truman does not want to be president, and that even given the chance that he has been president, he wants to get out of it, that he wants to live his life instead, and was only really encouraged by his wife to run for the position to validate his actions in his own mind. A similar attitude is projected in his personal letters. Truman refers to the White House as jail in a personal letter from 1952 and confides that it is a relief for him to get out of Washington in a response to a letter from a mother of a staff member at the White House towards the end of his term. Something to me that could go either way in terms of accuracy is his knowledge of the Manhattan Project prior to becoming president. To me, the film overemphasized his knowledge of the bomb, and he overhears the word Manhattan in respects to a weapon to come, and when he starts to inquire about it around other colleagues in the government system, he is told to not mention the word Manhattan again until eventually he learns the full project in his presidency. However, in the Robert Dallek biography on page 26, Truman had indirect indications of the effort to build a secret weapon that will be a wonder before taking office, and did not learn of the Manhattan Project as it was called until after Roosevelt's death. This could be interpreted in two different ways. One, that it shows that in both in the film and in history, he had some awareness of the making of the atomic bomb, or that there was supposed to be a supreme weapon in development, but he was not fully informed until after he became president, or on the way of literally interpreting the quote from the biography of saying that he did not know it was called the Manhattan Project and had not made that tie. As in the movie, he was aware of that there was a weapon project under the codename Manhattan. A thing that for sure that they got wrong was Truman's reason for bombing Hiroshima. In the movie, they undeniably put his reasoning of trying to save lives and do what's best for the American people. And this is also somewhat reflected in the biography as well. On page 23, it says, Truman's eagerness for a quick and complete Japanese surrender mainly rested on his concern about saving American lives. At first, it seems that historically, in the context of the biography, it's all accurate that his intentions were for the American soldiers and American public, but even Truman himself would say otherwise. In a response to the Federal Council of Churches of Christ, which voiced its concern about dropping the bomb and the ethics of it, he tries to reassure them of his course of action, saying that the only language that the Japanese seem to understand is the one we have been using to bombard them. And saying that when you have to deal with a beast, you have to treat him as a beast. So, concluding that his reasoning for bombing Hiroshima wasn't so much to deal with the ideals of Americans and trying to protect American soldiers, but was based on opinion and perception of the Japanese in the war. It's somewhat rooted in racism, also rooted in retaliation for Pearl Harbor, the attack, and the treatment of American prisoners of war by Japanese soldiers. Another thing that they got wrong is that they failed to include that after the war, Truman had a reluctance to give up armed forces. In the Robert Dallek biography on page 40, it says that Truman was reluctant to give in what he privately called the disintegration of our armed forces, or basically meaning the demilitarization of the armed forces and getting rid of those presences overseas. This is in stark contrast to the heartwarming moment in the movie where Truman tells the cook at the White House that they will bring her son, who is deployed overseas, home soon, which implies that he has the value of trying to bring back American troops as quickly as possible. In addition to that, the buck does not always stop here. Robert Dowlick's biography says that in order to slow the demobilization of troops, Truman encouraged Congress to take the heat from the public that wanted him to engage in rapid demobilization, as opposed to taking full credit upon his decision. On the bright side, the movie did have an accurate portrayal of who all was involved in the idea of recognizing the state of Israel, that this was not solely Truman's choice, that he sought out advisement by other members of the White House, or in the political arena. In the movie, it says, or in the movie, in a hearing about which nation that America should support, Truman invites Clark Clifford to put in his 2 cents about the recognition of Israel. Clifford gives his moral reasoning for granting a safe haven for people who have undergone levels of suffering that would boggle the human mind. In the real world, something similar took place, as in the Israeli president, Chaim Weizmann, thanked Clark Clifford for his help in getting Truman to recognize Israel via a letter released in 1949. Moving on to analysis of Truman's character traits portrayed in the film versus what he was observed to act like via the biographies, observations, and his own words. One thing that there was a subtle hint to, but not a completely accurate depiction of his personality, was his sensitivity to criticism and overall having thin skin. The main point I see this during the movie was the scene of the last day in the White House when Eisenhower takes office, and Eisenhower refuses to do the traditional lunch with the former first family with Truman. And he tries to refuse to leave until Eisenhower will see him, and only really gives in and leaves the White House when his wife gently encourages him to just go home. This depiction of Truman's behavior in the face of controversy and conflict is painted in a much more tame way than some ways he's known to behave and retaliate. In his letter about the press, released in 1953, he says that conditions are that I can do no wrong and I can do no right, meaning his criticism of the public only seeing the positive in Eisenhower and the wrongdoings in his actions. And in a letter to a friend where he seeks assistance in protecting his historical legacy, a letter written in 1962, he says that now articles are coming out along with books showing that I could never make a decision unless some smart boy told me how to make it. Kind of drawing on that the buck stops here, that he prided himself on making decisions and taking the consequences for those decisions, and that people were starting to start these accusations of how he ran in the presidency. Another personality trait, in my opinion, that needed more build-up in the film was that Truman was, as we said in class, a guy with rough edges. It was hinted at in the movie that he had some casual attributes that were less formal and presidential on some occasions, but it does not go to the level of unprofessional character he demonstrates in private. In the film, the moments I see that he kind of breaks those professional barriers, that he seems more like an average person just interacting as he would, is when he hugs his family before he's about to be sworn in, and they have to ask him to stop so they can actually swear him in. That he just shows that vulnerability and wanting to seek comfort from his family, along with the moment he goes to the kitchen to thank the staff for the birthday cake, and a member of the staff actually says that it is not very often that a president comes down for reasons other than work related with the staff. While in letters, in real letters, this is amplified to the max that he shows a level of being unpolished to the point of seeming uneducated even, and having a very brash personality. In the same letter where he sought out a friend to help protect his historical legacy, there are several misspellings that reflect upon the fact that he was uneducated, not college educated, opposed to many politicians receiving advanced educations. And on his analysis of the press in 59, he said, "Sometimes I've been so worked up about what was published about you and General Marshall that I had been glad to punch the publisher." Also going on to say, "I said to him that any SOB who tried to shoot me would get the gun shoved up his behind, and I pulled the trigger." All very aggressive statements that would not fly today, and presidents in more recent times have been criticized for saying things too informal and in these circumstances. So, in my opinion, they could have ramped that up more and portrayed him with more of that crash way of thinking and speaking. It also is reflected in the biography on page 45 that there was actually a draft speech that he wrote during the railroad strike that included a satirical proposal for hanging a few traitors, which once again has that really grave tone to it, but it's put in a satirical manner that that level of satire is not usually appreciated among politics. And yet we still have to ask, why was a film made about a president with the second lowest approval rating after World War II presented him in such a way that his presidency was a heroic sacrifice of his dreams of being an everyday man? This was something that, when it was asked of us, it really bothered me, and I was going to scour the earth to try to find the answer. I even went to some family members who were alive in the early 90s, which is when the film was released, and asked what was going on in the world that might have influenced this perspective. And I have come to the conclusion that it was because of Truman's notable contribution to the conflict that had just ended in 91, which was the Cold War between the US and the USSR. I pieced this together based on a discussion in class that we had about how there was supposed to be an attack on Japan initiated by the US and the Soviet Union, and that America, in its own interest, secretly developed the Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb, in order to beat the Soviets at weapon development, which was a recurring theme in the Cold War of that arms race, trying to stockpile weapons, get more dangerous weapons together for that mutually assured destruction. And ultimately, the US would drop them on Hiroshima before the joint attack was to be executed with the US and the USSR in order to display that militant and technological power that the US has over the Soviet Union, which ties into that arms race that would later develop as they emerged as the global superpowers, and also to fulfill the containment policy for containing communism and preventing its spread in impressionable countries by keeping Soviet influence out of Japan. Ultimately, it would be the US that rebuilds Japan and helps them reconstruct, and eventually we become industrial allies in the 21st century. So that is my review of the movie Truman. I hope that my analysis on the positive outlook of the film is correct. If not, I greatly look forward to hearing what the actual answer is for that, how close I was. And yeah, thank you.